Wired.com presents The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. And here is your host, David Barr Kirtley.
Hello, and welcome to episode 152 of Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. Today on the show, we'll be discussing the current state of post-apocalyptic fiction and reviewing the new George Miller film Mad Max Fury Road. And this will potentially involve spoilers for all 4 Mad Max movies, so just be aware of that. And I'm joined by 3 guests. So first up, we've got our producer, John Joseph Adams. He's the editor of Lightspeed and Nightmare magazines, and also the series editor of Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy. He's also edited many other anthologies, including the recent books Wastelands 2, Operation Arcana, and Help Fund My Robot Army. So John, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Then next up, we've got Hugh Howey, who you may remember from our feature interview back in episode 83. His self-published post-apocalyptic novel Wool became a runaway bestseller on Amazon.com, and he also sold the film rights to Ridley Scott, director of Blade Runner and Alien. Together with John, he co-edited the Apocalypse Tryptic of post-apocalyptic anthologies, The End is Nigh, The End is Now, and The End Has Come. So Hugh, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, David. Thanks for having me back, man.
Yeah. And then also joining us today is Carrie Vaughn, who you may remember from our feature interview back in episode 9, and our panel on Big Hero 6 versus Interstellar in episode 127. She's the author of the New York Times bestselling Kitty Norville series, about a werewolf who hosts a radio call-in show for supernatural creatures. The final book in the series, Kitty Saves the World, will be out in August. You can also read her new short story Bannerless in John and Hugh's anthology The End Has Come. So Carrie, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks.
All right, so let's start out and talk a bit about this new Mad Max movie, Fury Road. So John, let's start off with you and just tell us a bit about how big of a Mad Max fan are you and what sort of expectations did you have going into this movie?
Yeah, so you might expect that I would be a huge Mad Max fan, being a big post-apocalyptic guy, but I actually don't really have any particular affinity for those movies. I appreciate what they contributed to sort of the post-apocalyptic canon, but I don't really enjoy them as movies per se, except like in sort of parts here and there, like, oh, that was a cool scene, but I don't know, there's something about them that I just I never really dug. So I had very low expectations when I heard about the movie. I was like, who cares, and I wasn't even really planning to see it until you had suggested we talk about it on this panel, and so I was like, all right, I guess I could get up some enthusiasm to see it. But that was before I saw all the pre-reviews, or the early reviews coming in, and like everyone was like losing their mind over this movie. Like Charlie Jane Anders at IO9 called it an astonishing work of art. Not what I expected when I was looking for reviews for this movie. I just I went in with very basically no expectations, and And although I will say, once I saw the most recent trailer, that sort of started getting me very excited about it, because like the first trailer looked like it was an action movie and it looked fine, but then like the most recent trailer, the one that focuses on Furiosa, it's called the number 2 trailer or whatever. Like if you Google it and you look it up on YouTube, that trailer is like amazing, and that's the one where it's like it really plays up the lovely day thing, which I thought was funny. But yeah, so anyway, that's how I approached the movie.
Okay, so how about Carrie? Same question.
Oh gosh. This is going to sound weird to a lot of people, but I really loved Beyond Thunderdome when it came out. And I know that makes me unique among Mad Max fans. But part of that is I was the same age as the kids in the Oasis when Beyond Thunderdome came out. And I really identified with them in a very strange way. Being a child of the Cold War and kind of growing up through the whole fear of the nuclear apocalypse, the Mad Max movies are so iconic about that. And Beyond Thunderdome is the one I really latched onto. It's the one I've seen the most. It's the one I really think about when I think of Mad Max. I've seen Road Warrior, and it's a fine movie as well. I'm trying to remember when the last time I saw the first Mad Max movie, and I'm having trouble even remembering it. And I think that one is so disturbing in so many ways. It's not one that I go back to. But the other ones are great. So I'm one of those people who's really looking forward to Fury Road, and I loved it so much. I can't even tell you. I could just sit here and ramble on about it for an entire hour myself, because I think it wasn't just a great Mad Max movie, it was a great movie. And strangely enough, even though movies, post-apocalyptic, especially post kind of nuclear apocalyptic movies, seem kind of dated as a concept. It's a very 80s thing. So why are we still telling those stories? But in some ways, this was a really kind of timely and relevant movie. So I'm super excited about it, and I'm super excited to talk about it.
Yeah, and we definitely want to get into all that stuff. But before we do, Hugh, just tell us a bit about your background with the Mad Max movies.
The first of the films I saw was Road Warrior. So that was when I saw that as a kid. I didn't even know there was a Mad Max movie. The one filmed in Australia with the it's so interesting that they like dubbed the American voices on it because they were worried people wouldn't understand the Australian actors. So I saw Road Warrior, and then I saw Beyond Thunderdome, and then I went and saw Mad Max afterwards. And to me, the original movie was kind of a letdown after seeing the other two. It was just a little, I guess, too campy and too out there. And I, like Carrie, I loved Beyond Thunderdome. I love the characters. I'll never forget, the giant with the midget on his shoulders. That
Master Blaster.
Master Blaster. I thought he was just one of the wildest, most imaginative characters when I was a kid, and I couldn't get him out of my head. So I went into this movie, went into Fury Road, really with my expectations high. I didn't like the first preview. I thought it was a little too over the top. And then I heard that the initial reviews were great. And when I sat in the theater, literally, like, my mind melted. I came out of that theater and tweeted that I still think this. I think it might be the best action movie ever made. There's just not a wasted frame. The character development is perfect. There's a lot of unexpected twists with some of the characters that didn't stick on the rails like could have in a lot of action movies. I'm dying right here now to sit and see it again. And it's one of those that I'll have to see a couple more times on the big screen because I don't think it'll have the same impact on home video.
Right. I want to expand a little bit, Hugh, on what you said about the Road Warrior, because my understanding is that I don't think pretty much anyone in America saw the original Mad Max. I think it got a really limited release to such an extent that when they released Mad Max 2, it was actually called Mad Max 2, but they renamed it in America The Road Warrior because they didn't want people to know that it was a sequel to something that they had never seen before. And I think it's kind of funny. The original Mad Max movie, I think it was written basically just as an action movie, and then they realized that they just couldn't afford to shoot it as a contemporary movie because they couldn't afford extras and, backgrounds and stuff. And they're like, oh, if we make it post-apocalyptic, then, we don't have to hire extras, basically. So
fascinating.
It's really, as a post-apocalyptic story, it's sort of lacking something. I think Road Warrior is, they actually had a budget to actually do it in a more interesting way. And they just took that to an incredible extreme with this new movie, Fury Road. So John, why don't you say a bit more about Fury Road? Just what are some of the things that you really liked about it?
Yeah, so I did definitely love it. I went to go see it with my wife, and then the next day, when she got up, I was like, can we go see it again? And I didn't actually get to go see it twice yet, but I definitely do want to see it again, and I like this so much. Like, I'm actually going out of town this weekend, and we're going up to San Francisco, and so I was like actually plotting, like, well, where can I see it on the way back, where it's going to be like a really good theater? Because I saw it in like in a decent theater, but I don't have any IMAX screens or anything nearby, and I was just trying to find, like, well, on the way between here and San Francisco, is there any like really awesome theater that I can stop at and see it? But yeah, it's like Hugh was saying. It's just like wall to wall action, and it's incredible how much story and character development that they actually get across when the movie is essentially a 2-hour long action sequence. And it's like, I don't even understand how they were able to do that. And there's so little dialogue. It's amazing how much story is communicated just visually and through the actors, like, so sort of emoting and stuff. It's like, it's kind of great. Just as a film, like, it does so many things I don't think I've ever seen before, just in terms of like the amazing action spectacle. And like he was saying, also, it's like, it does seem a little bit over. I mean, there's certainly the initial trailer seemed over the top, and the movie overall is pretty over the top. But it somehow really, really works, and in a way that kind of surprises me that I liked it as much as I did, because like a lot of movies like that I don't like when things go that far over the top. But like, I don't know, all of it just works well in the context of this world that's presented there on the screen. And I mean, even the crazy like guitar player like strapped on bungee cords to this giant wall of speakers on the truck with his flaming guitar. It's like, it somehow works. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me that it does, but it does.
Yeah, if I can interject there, John. So I heard all the advanced praise and all the reviews that, 98% rating on Rotten Tomatoes or something like that. And everybody universally was talking about the over-the-top action, that this was the greatest action movie. Action, action, action. The stunts are great. The action is great. I came out of the movie wondering why nobody had talked about the story, because I think it's an amazing story, and it's a very tightly plotted story with at least 3 distinct character arcs that are primary to the story, and then a lot of other little character arcs, kind of flowing underneath that. I propose that the reason the action is so great is because of the very tightly plotted story. So that, as Hugh is saying, there's not a wasted scene. There's not, random monsters don't come out of nowhere to attack for no reason. Everything that happens is in service to the story. And if you'd had that action without the story, the action would not have seemed as good as it does.
I think the themes are so deep and poignant as well. There's been a lot of noise about the theme of woman power and the real strong feminist message in here, which the fact that people are surprised about that's bizarre to me, considering there's been strong female characters in several of these films.
Yeah.
But the thing that I really, really loved about this film was the idea of not dreaming for a heaven that might not exist, but making the place here and now a heaven. And there's one great line in the movie where one character says to another, "If you can't fix what's broken, there is no hope." And so the idea, and I know we're going to have spoilers throughout this, so hopefully people have seen this movie, but the idea of like having to run off to find a green place rather than making it where you are, that people are spraying chrome on their faces and hoping they die and go to Valhalla. It makes those people look foolish. And there's a lot of people living today who just think, I'm going to follow these rules and I'm going to go to some better place, in the end times, when, let's make this the better place. And I thought that was a really cool theme throughout the movie.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll say that I just want to put in for the record that I loved every minute of this movie, just in case anyone was wondering about that. And my concern going into it was that it was going to be all CGI. I thought the trailer looked cool, but I was afraid it was going to be all CGI. And apparently there was very little CGI in this movie. It was apparently 90% practical effects. And apparently they had Cirque du Soleil performers and Olympic athletes and all the stunts they really did with those big poles and everything. It's just really, really amazing.
That's one of the great things that I think this movie might do for other movies, in that not just that it will sort of redefine what an action movie can accomplish, but maybe it'll, encourage people to like, hey, practical effects actually can look amazing when you do them right, and they can look way better than CGI because they look real, and I think that would be a great trend to start.
Right. But then, John, the other thing that going into this movie, before there was any advanced buzz or anything, I just noticed, I don't know how common, all over New York they have these posters for the movie, and I don't know how common this image is, but it's Charlize Theron, and then Tom Hardy's kind of in the background with a mask over his face, and it really makes it look like she's the main character. And that sort of really struck me, and I said, I remarked on that to my girlfriend, and she said, "Oh, well, maybe for the marketing, they're trying to, appeal to women and get them into the theater because the men are all going to go see it anyway." But so that was my first maybe inkling that there was going to be this sort of what turned into a large amount of discussion around the women characters in this movie. But yeah, do people want to say anything more about that?
About the marketing,
or about the women characters in the movie and how, and what the response to that has been?
I could talk about that forever, but I didn't notice the poster. I didn't notice that there was anything weird about the poster with Charlize Theron's character being in front, although the MRA people apparently made a big deal about it. I didn't think it was a big deal because Beyond Thunderdome had Auntie Entity and Savannah in it, who were both very strong women characters. Road Warrior had prominent women characters, so this isn't like it's a new thing for Mad Max. The thing that Fury Road does, and there's all the really obvious stuff about sexual slavery and the escape from that. There's some really great interviews out with George Miller about how that grew out of the story, that he wanted to have the story about these slaves, these breeders escaping from the main villain, and how he realized he couldn't have a man doing the rescuing. It had to be a woman doing the rescuing, because if it was a man, it would just screw up the whole dynamic and kind of undermine that part of the story. And so that was all really obvious. The thing that made the movie really stand out and made it something special for me is the motorcycle gang, the Vuvolini. We see the motorcycle gang. Let me back up a little bit. So they're in the middle of this dry, blasted wasteland. They stop. They see the tower with the naked woman on it who is screaming and terrified. And Max says, "That's bait." And I just laughed and laughed and laughed, because that was exactly what I was thinking. It's like, oh, yes, there's something going on here, and this is going to be fantastic. So, yes, she's bait. And the gang comes over the hill, and they take off their masks, and they take off their scarves, and it's a bunch of grandmas. But it's not just grandmas. It's, there's these mature women of a certain age, I think some people call them, and they're survivors, and they're fighters, and they're mothers, and they're nurturers, and it's totally taken for granted. There's no explanation for it. They're just there. They're part of this landscape. They're part of the story. And I have never seen anything like that in a movie ever. I think about there have been plenty of chick flicks about multi-generational women doing things and working together. Things like Steel Magnolias and Fried Green Tomatoes and stuff, but they're chick flicks. To see that dynamic, or something like that dynamic, happening in a movie like Mad Max was so revolutionary and so brilliant that I have no words. I have no words for, speaking as a woman in her 40s, how massively powerful that was. And then to have the entire third half of the movie that's these women working together and teaching each other and fighting for each other in a totally straightforward way. It was perfect. It was just perfect.
I saw someone point out also that there was actually 12 women on screen at once at some point, and 7 of them were having a conversation about something other than a man. So it's like it just took the Bechdel test and just smash it to pieces, basically.
Yeah, the entire third act was, in fact, I think in the entire third act, if you tried to do a reverse Bechdel test, were there actually men talking together about anything during the third act? I'm not sure there are.
Right.
So hooray!
Yeah, I thought one of the most moving images in the whole movie was when the one of the older ladies and the younger ladies were facing each other, and what it really captured that on the left you had the younger lady and on the right you had the older lady, and it really captured the cyclical nature of generations. Like, you saw the past in one half of the image, and you saw the inevitable future in the other half. And more than just character development, you saw this generational development, and probably the biggest character arc besides the war boy who makes a complete turnaround were the women themselves, who went from needing to be rescued to coming back and rescuing everyone else. Like, what a quick turnaround! Just in a few days, they went from fumbling for their footing to wielding weapons and putting up a fight against people who were ultimate masculinity and bred for war, and kicking butt and pulling it off in a believable way. There's never an easy out or Deus Ex Machina kind of cheat in the entire plot, which is startling considering how over the top everything is. Everything kind of followed from the previous sequence. I thought that was amazing. And the fact that you could follow the action at all times, for things to be that hectic, and for George to keep the directing simple enough to follow the fight sequences. I don't know that he'll be able to top this, or that anyone will top this for a long time. It was just someone so confident in their ability that they didn't have to show off. Instead, they just kind of set a new bar that I don't think will be surpassed for a while.
Well, and Hugh, on the subject of clarity, I mean, you're right that the action scenes were so clear. But one thing that really struck me about this movie is that it doesn't. There's no info dumps. There's no like idiot proofing of the exposition whatsoever. It just you're in this world and it's up to you to keep up. I'd actually be really curious to watch it again and just see. I mean, there were a couple of things that took me about halfway into the movie about the world before it clicked, and I'm just curious. Would it be, was I just a little slow, or did you need to get that far into the story before all the bits and pieces kind of coalesced in your mind?
So here's something I thought was interesting about like the world building and everything. So I went to go see this with my wife and my 12-year-old stepdaughter. We knew that maybe it was going to be a little violent for her, but she seemed like she thought it would be cool, and so we all went, and my wife Christy and I, we both loved it. And I actually wasn't even sure that Christy was going to like it, because she often gets bored during action sequences. Like, you'll go to one of these movies like Avengers or something, and people will come out of it talking about like, oh, that was an amazing action sequence, whatever. And she's like, that was my like least favorite part of the movie. You know what I mean? But this, she was like enthralled with the entire movie from start to finish, even, and maybe even especially because of the action sequences. But I thought it was really interesting. My 12-year-old stepdaughter was completely bored by the whole movie. Like she didn't get it at all. Like, and I think it was actually a really bold choice for George Miller to actually just make this movie just explicitly an R-rated, action movie intended for adults. Not pandering to the PG-13 audience at all, which a lot of action movies do, and I think much for the worse. And so it was just really, really great to see that. I mean, it's like, there's lots of action movies that are maybe on par with the sort of level of action and violence, or maybe, well, no, nothing's on par with the action level of this movie, but there's a lot of movies that like have a lot, almost as much violence, and yet they're sort of targeted at this younger demographic because they want to get that magical PG-13 rating, which, opens you up to the most profits. But, I really appreciated him, saying screw that and just going for broke.
As far as the world building, I think, and I think this is in the movie's favor, that it is depending on a filmmaking language that has been around for about 35 years now, since the very first Mad Max movie, of the post-apocalyptic, why is that word so hard to say? This is going to be tough. That landscape, that's part of why I love the movie is I'm a big fan of the genre. I call it the 1980s post-apocalyptic road trip movie. And it's an entire genre, and there's hundreds of movies that fit in that genre. And there's things that you always see over and over and over again, like the motorcycle gangs and the desert landscape, and just the gonzo weirdness. And that kind of thing doesn't need an explanation, because that's part of the genre. It's part of the tropes. You just need to sit back and take it in. I've been kind of joking with people, but it's not really joking, that I have seen people, I've seen a lot of blog comments and Facebook posts and things that, well, this movie had no story. This movie had no story. And my response is, well, just because nobody stopped to explain it to you doesn't mean there's not a story there. And once again, I'll say that if anybody wants to top this as an action movie, they need to start with a really good story and then hang the action on it, rather than trying to come up with the ultimate stunt and then just shoehorning it into something that makes no sense,
See, Hugh, I mean, do you want to say anything else about the world building in this movie, or how it's what sets it apart from other post-apocalyptic kind of movies?
Well, I think something that has in common is what you talked about, not doing info dumps and letting people understand the world slowly. I love that about speculative fiction and science fiction. It's kind of the opposite with fantasy, where the history of the world is so important that you have prologues and you just like dump, this is the king so-and-so of land so-and-so of the son of so-and-so, and you just really revel in that. But with a lot of speculative fiction, part of the mystery is the world. And like, Carrie's Bannerless is like that in our Tryptic. I think it's one of the best stories we have in across the three novels, to be honest.
Thank you.
And
Aw.
no, man, we read that before the second one came out, and it was like hard to wait a whole novel to get that out there. But you learn the rules of this world slowly, and that's part of the mystery. And I think, so the film doesn't do anything different. It just does it as well as you can possibly do it. I think he pulled it off superbly.
Well, it's funny you mentioned fantasy, Hugh, because after the movie, all my friends were fixated on the scene where they drive across the muddy plain, and there are these weird people on stilts walking around.
I love that so much.
Yeah,
gosh.
I love that. It was like Salvador Dali had a moment in the middle of the film like that.
Yeah, and so it was like something out of Dark Crystal or something.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, my wife whispered to me. She's like, Skeksis.
Carrie, do you want to gush about that?
I would love to. Yeah, it's the Landstriders in Dark Crystal use the same kind of stilt technology, and they don't need an explanation. It is part of the world. It's a detail. It was beautiful. I mean, there's a really strange way in which you've got the crows, the colors in those scenes. I agree with Charlie Jane Anders that there are parts of this movie that are just an absolute work of art. The color scheme and the swamp. And the thing is, as random and as gonzo and as weird as that scene was, and I kind of want to know more about, the swamp stilt people, but I kind of don't. I kind of don't want to know what they're doing there, what's really going on. Because the moment in the plot that's building up, of course, is that, this used to be the green place, and now it's not anymore because something terrible happened. Because that's immediately what your mind goes to when they get beyond and they meet the Vuvolini and they say, but if you're coming from the west, you've already been through the green place. And your mind immediately goes back to that horrible, crow-ridden, wretched swamp. And your heart drops along with the characters at that point because you're like, that place wasn't green at all. It was, blue and muddy and yucky and horrible. And that's the place where you get stuck and you don't want to be there anymore. So there are different kinds of world building, and I think that there's the kind of world building where you sit and you try to explain it all to the audience, but then there's just the kind where you just sort of hang these pictures on the wall and trust that by the time you get them all hung up, it will make this beautiful collage that will mean something greater than the sum of the parts.
Okay, so just out of curiosity, at the beginning when Max first gets strapped to the front of the car with a a blood thing in him, do we understand? Did you guys understand exactly what was going on at that point, or is that something that only becomes clear as the story progresses?
I think there was a quick line of dialogue that explained it. And if you missed that, it was tricky. But, he said that basically he's not just getting his blood, he's getting part of his personality through that blood, like that this guy was like complete madness. And so getting Mad Max's blood was, giving him that like crazy juice basically to go a little over the top and push himself the way Mad Max has done as a survivor. So some of his personality was kind of leaching through there, and to me that made his presence on the vehicle believable. I mean, these are nitrous oxide fueled vehicles throughout the series of movies. They have a certain level of speed, then you hit the juice to open the bottle, and you have that second boost. And in this case, Mad Max was the bottle.
And the war boys are ill. They are actually sick. They are dying of radiation or illness or whatever the post-apocalyptic trope. That is what they are dying of. So there was also, the way I read it is they actually need blood transfusions to survive. There's the scene very early on where they're actually tattooing Max's medical information on his back so that they could just look at a glance and see who matches his blood type so that he can, give transfusions so that the war boys will be physically strong enough to be able to go out to battle.
That's interesting. I got the thing Carrie said, but a little bit later in the story. I didn't get the thing Hugh said at all. I must have missed that line, but that's actually really interesting. How about the thing in their religion where they, like, right before they expect to die, they kind of spray paint their mouths with chrome? Yeah. What do you guys make of that?
Car culture.
I loved it.
It's they're in a car culture, and not just a car culture, but a classic car culture. I thought that was a great detail that, the apocalypse happened at X year, and there's not a car after that. There are no new cars in that movie. They're all old and vintage. which makes you cry a little bit when you see them get destroyed. But that's part of the grief process, I guess. Yeah, I saw that as their culture and religion is built around cars. So they are making themselves more like the cars by spraying the chrome.
What's cool too is like guys who get that the bling in their mouth. You know, they started calling your smile your grill.
Yeah,
so it kind of played on that too.
Yeah, with the spray paint thing, I didn't quite catch on. That's what they were doing at first, and at first I was trying to figure out, was it actually just spray paint, or was it supposed to be some kind of drug or something? In that, like, you know, they to sort of give them a little boost or something right before they died, because it seemed like they kept, you know, because they were always doing it right before they thought they were about to die, and so I thought it was like, oh, okay, well this is a little something to sort of push them over the top, which it kind of seems to do, even though it turns out it's just spray paint. It's just that it's like, you know, they sort of get adrenaline going because they're like, you know, they're trying to go out with a bang so that they can, you know, enter Valhalla in style or whatever.
Hey, go spray some spray paint in your mouth. I bet you will get a little bit of a buzz.
I'll take your word for it.
See, Carrie, you said you had a lot of things to gush about. Do you have just maybe one or two more while we have time that you want to gush about?
Gosh, one or two more. Well, Furiosa, of course. And I read, there's a great blog post going around, if you do a little bit of poking, by a woman who was born without her left arm. And she went to see this movie, and she's talking about how amazing it was to see a woman in an action movie, you know, with one arm, and it's not a big deal. You know, once again, we don't know, you know, was Furiosa born without an arm? Did she lose the arm? We don't know, and you know what? It doesn't matter, because it doesn't actually, the reason why she has one arm doesn't affect the character in the slightest. This is who she is. This is just part of her. And that's also revolutionary. You know, it's yet another really revolutionary thing about this movie, that so many things are just there without kind of needing to point a big neon arrow at it going, look at this cool thing that we did. It's just part of the story. So that was great. The mothers, the milking the mothers was a image that came early on that was just strange and bizarre and weird. And the movie doesn't spend a lot of time on it.
That's some Piers Anthony shit.
Well, it's you know, on the one hand you're looking at it going, this is really messed up, but then a little voice in the back of your mind goes, well, you know, actually in this kind of world this makes a little bit of sense. And it's wrong, and it's part of the world, and it's kind of genius at the same time.
All right, so I hate to even mention it, but does anyone have any criticism of this movie?
I think my only criticism is that it wasn't actually called Mad Max What a Lovely Day. Like, I think that would be hilarious. And actually, like, I would have loved to see it called that, and then have the trailer recut, so it's like, from George Miller, director of Babe, Pig in the City, Happy Feet 2 comes Mad Max. What a Lovely Day. Like, that would be amazing. I mean, because he actually did direct those movies. Like, how crazy is that?
And I love Babe. You know, when you point it out, you can actually see Babe is a very disturbing movie at some level. I can totally see that it's directed by the same person.
Well, he directed Babe 2. Babe 2.
Oh, he didn't direct the first one?
No, somebody else did.
Oh, okay.
It's like, what a weird filmography.
Great.
He also did the two Happy Feet movies.
Yeah.
You know, the thing I would have, you know, the movie is almost perfect to me. I think one thing that would have made it just a little bit stronger was to have a couple more character development scenes for the main bad guy where, and it wouldn't take much at all to make him a little more nefarious. Like when he's delivering the water, if it was someone else delivering the water and he reached over and pulled their hand back, so that the idea was you could give them a lot more water, but I'm choosing not to. And one other scene with, you know, him being abusive to an underling, or, you know, he was fearsome in guise, but he didn't really have the same level of like complete scared of this dude the way you did some of the bad guys in the other three films.
Oh, I don't know. There's that scene where he's, you know, Angarad has just fallen off the truck and gone under the wheels, and he's there holding her body like she's some kind of sack of grain. He's pretty horrifying. I don't know that he needs
like even
that
with that
much
scene,
more.
I felt pity for him in that scene. Like I don't know. The next scene where he's more concerned about the baby than her was more of that kind of evil development that I like. And I like complex characters. I don't want evil for the sake of being evil, but the other movies had me really terrified for the main characters that they would be caught by the bad guy. And in this one, I was concerned for the main characters and they might fall under the wheel of a vehicle or get blown up in an explosion. But I didn't really fear for what would happen if the bad guy caught them, like I was in the other movies, where you thought, they're going to be tortured and dismembered and thrown into the Thunderdome, that kind of thing.
All the torture's already happened.
Yeah,
that's what they're getting away from.
I think maybe just a little more depravity, but other than that, the movie was perfect.
Well, and I mean, they clearly needed more Tina Turner songs.
You never have too many Tina Turner songs.
That's what I'm saying.
I mean, my one, I wouldn't even change it. I thought I liked the movie the way it is, but I mean, the one thing that occurred to me watching it was I thought that Nux, the Jim Holt or whatever his name character is,
Nicholas Holt,
Nicholas Holt, that he went that for someone who was so brainwashed at the beginning that he made a really, really quick abandonment of his religion and everything, and I had a little bit of a trouble accepting that, but.
No, he fell in love though. Look, guys will change their religion very quickly when they fall in love, and I really think it was seeing his relationship with one of the freed wives that turned him around, and being denied entry into heaven like 3 times, and then her compassion for him. I thought that scene with them at the back of the truck was just unbelievable. I mean, so much was conveyed in just a short period of time. So I bought it. I could see how it is a big turnaround, but that was the surprise for me, how I hated this guy. And by the end of the movie, I loved him, like a guy that you wanted to die because it was going to help Mad Max if he died. You went from wanting him to die to mourning his death in 2 hours. That was pretty cool.
See, Carrie, do you have any criticisms or anything you want to add?
I'm sitting here trying to think of what I would change, and I wouldn't. I can't actually think of anything. I want a spin-off movie about the Vuvolini. That's what I want. That's what I would change. I would have a second movie all about them.
I heard that the second another movie has already been greenlit, and that it was supposed to focus a lot more on Furiosa. So I mean, I think that's definitely cool too. I mean, because I would definitely watch a whole movie just about her without Mad Max altogether. And did you guys did you hear about this? Did you hear this fan theory that that Mad Max in Fury Road was actually not the original Mad Max, but was actually one of those little kids that he meets in like one of the other movies. Like, I don't know them well enough to tell you which kid, but it
was the feral child. Is the
the feral child. Yeah. So it's like I thought that was a really interesting theory. It's like, and I mean, even the article that was talking about it was saying, oh well, it kind of breaks some of the mythology or whatever in order to believe that, but it's kind of a fun idea.
It doesn't. I don't think it works really at all. But I mean, it does. I mean, there is something wonky with the chronology, because Mad Max is 37 and he had a whole life as a police officer before this. And how long has this world been in a post-apocalyptic condition? You kind of have to just sort of hand wave that a little bit.
I look at it. It's like James Bond,
Sure.
There've been 50 years, 40 years of James Bond movies, and he stays pretty much the same through all of them. I look at it the same.
Yeah. Well, I did want to say about the other movies, though, is that, apparently, because George Miller has been trying to make this movie, Fury Road, for 10 years. And it was originally, there was supposed to be Mel Gibson, but then that didn't work out, ultimately. And so he's had a lot of time to think about other Mad Max stories. And I think he said he has one script written and another one has like a treatment for it. And and I think the first of those was originally titled Mad Max Furiosa. And I think he changed it to Mad Max The Wasteland, if I have the facts right. But it does suggest that that she'll probably be in it, right, as a major character. And Nerdist was reporting that these are prequel movies. So I don't know how that, because he hasn't met her in this one before, right? So I don't know how that would work exactly. But I do expect to see more Furiosa in the future.
I also saw that apparently Tom Hardy, who plays Mad Max, he was pretty skeptical about the whole movie, like while they were filming it, and because the filming was very difficult because they did all these like big, huge practical stunts and everything. And apparently he apologized sincerely to George Miller after he saw the final cut, because he was like, man, I had no idea that's what you were doing. It's like I can totally imagine that. Like, how could you conceive what he was going to actually accomplish when you're out there making this thing and you don't get to see it all put together? And God, can't even imagine being on location with them, like trying to shoot these scenes with these gigantic trucks and everything that they built. Like, they actually built all these trucks, like that truck full of speakers, and like everything worked. Apparently George Miller was intent on making sure everything worked. So like that guitar that shot flame out of it, that actually did that. It was the actual working guitar that shot flame out of it.
I saw this with a friend who said he was really glad this didn't come out when he was 15, because he would be trying to build that guitar right now.
Yeah.
I saw this I'm here in Africa, and I saw this with someone who said, we have dunes that look a lot like that, like north of here in another country up in Africa. And I thought, I just assumed it was shot like outside of LA, But it turns out it was shot here in Africa.
Yeah.
And that
Namibia.
they were. Yeah, so imagine, just the logistics of this. And supposedly, like, tempers were kind of running hot on the set because there were all kinds of delays and stuff. But I heard Tom Hardy was either staying in character too much or something, but he was kind of a little miffed with being upstaged in the film during the shooting, but I don't know if that was just him staying in character or not. But whatever drama happened in the background, it all worked to the service of the film, because there was not a bad performance in the movie. That was another thing that stood out. None of the ancillary characters kind of stood out for acting. Everybody was completely believable, which is weird for a plot that's so unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, I was an extra once for one day, and I was totally exhausted at the end of that. So I can just imagine what it's like shooting. I think they said one of the car chase sequences took 138 days straight to shoot.
Oh my God!
Like in the Namibian desert, I can just imagine you would get a little, your tempers would be running high. But actually, another funny thing about though is that apparently they scouted this whole location and they were all set up to film, and then it had rained too much and it looked all pretty and there were wildflowers blooming everywhere, and they're like, damn it, and they had to find a whole another place to shoot. All right, cool. Yeah, so we could talk about, like Carrie was saying, we could talk about that movie all day, but we do have some other stuff we want to talk about. And I mean, like Carrie was kind of saying, that there's this whole genre of post-apocalyptic films and radioactive wastelands and nuclear fallout and all this stuff. And it's kind of seemed like this is, it seems like a bit of a throwback, because we haven't seen a ton of that in recent years in big movies like this. And so, John, as our post-apocalyptic expert here, do you want to just comment on that? Is this, do you think it's going to be a renaissance for this kind of movie, or just what is the place, what role is Mad Max going to play in the bigger picture of nuclear fallout movies?
Yeah, well, I mean, I hope it becomes a bit of a renaissance. I mean, if people take the right lessons from this movie, instead of just thinking that, like, all we have to do is throw 100% action into a movie, like them misinterpreting that there was actually all this story being delivered in Mad Max. I'm not interested in seeing a bunch of sort of Mad Max movie clones that get the sort of some of the surface but none of the heart. I mean, I'm not interested in that. But I mean, I would love to see more post-apocalyptic movies, and especially big revolutionary action movies like this too. And the thing is, as a huge post-apocalyptic fan, oftentimes people will ask me, but well, what are my favorite apocalyptic movies? And it's like, honestly, I have to struggle to find things to say as a favorite. Like there's lots of movies that I like parts of, or I like the way the apocalypse is depicted, but I don't know that I necessarily like them overall, and I don't necessarily think that they're like good movies overall. And so, I mean, I think most of the time I would by default just say 12 Monkeys, even though that's kind of a cheat, because it's mostly a time travel movie. But now I'm glad that I can actually say that my favorite post-apocalyptic movie is Mad Max Fury Road, and not feel bad about it whatsoever. Not with any qualifications or anything. It's just like, obviously that's my favorite post-apocalyptic movie.
I mean, Hugh, do you want to pick up on that? I mean, you wrote this series Wool that's a post-apocalyptic thing. Kind of, what do you think is sort of the current state of post-apocalyptic film and fiction?
I think it's awesome. I think we make this mistake of thinking that post-apocalyptic stories are new. It seems like every 10 years we act like these disaster films or these apocalyptic films are all this new thing. And it's you look at the Old Testament was full of stories like this, and every religious tradition has their own version of the destruction and what comes after, and it's they're all survival films, and they go through different iterations, but the whole Lost on a Deserted Island was a type of post-apocalyptic survival film. The Westerns were a type of post-apocalyptic survival film. It's all about being in the wilderness with very, very little and how you make it through. So the guise of them has changed, but it's the story, the idea of going against nature and having to survive by your wits and how long will you last is thousands of years old. So is it getting better? Absolutely, because our storytelling abilities are getting better. It's because we're learning from the past and we're iterating. It has nothing to do with, in my opinion, it has nothing to do with any genre having a heyday. It's just we're telling the same stories over and over again. We're just getting a lot better at it.
Well, I mean, I don't think there's been any dearth of post-apocalyptic stories in terms of like zombie movies and things like that. But it does seem like there haven't been that many stories about nuclear war and the aftermath of nuclear war. And I just wonder, I kind of wonder if all these like Mad Max Road Warrior movies made people more aware of how bad a nuclear war would actually be, and if, as people like John's stepdaughter grow up, not watching all these after the bomb type things, if they're becoming a little bit more complacent about the prospect of nuclear war.
Yeah, these stories have never gone away. The method of apocalypse has changed. Like even the nuclear apocalypse story came to a head in the 80s for really obvious reasons. The bombs got so much better, and Reagan, escalating things. But even going back to the 60s, you have movies like Failsafe, On the Shore, on the shore or on the beach. The Neville Shute book. So that fear had a couple of generations to cook by the time we get to like Mad Max and The Day After and Threads and those kinds of movies. What's interesting to me is that the vehicle of apocalypse has changed. Like, I don't know that we need to instill a fear of nuclear war, because what we have instead, of course, are the fear of pandemic, the Ebolas of the world, climate change, climate collapse, economic collapse. The zombie apocalypse, I think, is a metaphor for all of these other things maybe put together. The disease and the climate and the economy all together. And so the tropes don't necessarily change. It's the vehicle of apocalypse that is very kind of easily adaptable from one apocalypse to the next.
Even if kids aren't reading this or aren't reading the post-apocalyptic fiction, and since the movies haven't been around, the nuclear apocalypse movies haven't been around. Maybe, like you say, Dave, they could be potentially getting complacent. But I think that the Fallout series of video games will certainly potentially fill in some of that void that the lack of movies had sort of created, because the Fallout series is a nuclear apocalypse, and I think that does a pretty good job of showing how terrible it would be, and maybe even better than a movie could, just because you have to actually live in it as a character, as you make your way through the game. And Borderlands too. I don't know what kind of apocalypse happens in Borderlands. It's I think it's mostly relevant, but yeah, I mean, I think, and I mean, that was actually one thing that I was really hoping after seeing Mad Max. I was like, oh my god, maybe this will mean we finally get a Fallout movie. So I would actually rather see that as a television series, because I think there's so many stories to tell. Or a Wool series, that would be also amazing.
Well, actually, John, do the Fallout games, is it just kind of like the Road Warrior as a video game, or does it bring something new or different to the post-apocalyptic setting?
Oh yeah, no, it brings a lot of different stuff to it. there's definitely parts of it that were influenced by the Road Warrior, and there's even characters that are basically just the Road Warrior, like exactly. But yeah, no, it brings a lot to it. I mean, it's like, people survived in these vaults, and so like a lot of technology and stuff has been preserved, and knowledge has been preserved, and so there's like this very complicated backstory mythology to the whole setting, and yeah, so I mean, I think it's definitely a lot more than that. It's and also a civilization has been sort of either built back up or preserved much more so than in Mad Max. Like Mad Max, there's almost nothing, right? In Fallout, there's actually some cities where it's like, okay, well, this is mostly a city as we would recognize it today. Obviously, a little worse for the wear and different because of all the different changes that have happened in the world. But there's definitely cities, and there's much more civilization there. So yeah, it's definitely a whole different thing.
Okay, so we're running a little short on time, so we should get into the Apocalypse Triptych. So Hugh, you want to talk about this? Tell us a bit about the Apocalypse Triptych.
I can tell you it's all John's brilliant idea. I was just along for the ride. But yeah, he came up with the idea, that apocalypse stories kind of take place in one of three settings, either during the apocalypse, which are like the disaster films that we've all seen, or the pre-apocalyptic, like the end is nigh, seeing the approaching doom, and of course what's been really popular lately, the post-apocalyptic. And his idea was to tell a series of stories across three anthologies that would cover each of those, and to have these stories linked together. So he had formulated all this on his own, and just we were at Worldcon in Chicago a few years ago, and went and had lunch just as mutual fans of each other's works. I had read Wastelands and he had read Wool, and so we went and had lunch and hung out, he and his wife, and he floated this idea and wanted to know if I wanted to be a part of it and help edit it. And I'd never, I've only edited my own work before, so I didn't know what I was agreeing to. But man, it's been like a year and a half, 2-year journey, and loved every minute of it, and learned so much, and been introduced to so many amazing writers that I wouldn't have discovered otherwise. So I'm just really honored that he invited me along for the ride.
Well, talk to you about some of the stories. I mean, what did you see any trends, or do the stories that people are writing these days say anything, you think, about what people are afraid of right now?
Yeah, it was really interesting. What I've seen this with some other anthologies. Like we studied in an anthology in a science fiction class at the College of Charleston, where all the stories had heavy feminist themes. And some of the people in the class asked if this was curated that way. And it wasn't. It's just you have people writing about very similar themes in popular culture at the same time. And when anthology came out, we were really pleasantly surprised about how many of these stories had gay protagonists or gay relationships in the as a feature of the plot. And that's just a social issue of the time that these people are writing. Like we aren't writing about race relations as much because we feel like we've made progress on that. And so the issues that are in our courts are percolating through these authors' minds. And when you read all these stories together, they're not reading each other's manuscripts. They have no idea what anyone else is writing. And for them to have that similar theme across the canon was really, really cool for me. It gave me an appreciation for how artists are wrestling with the same themes derived from culture all at the same time.
Huh. And so, Carrie, I mean, we mentioned that you wrote one of these stories. You want to tell us about your story, Bannerless?
Yeah. It's actually the third story I've written in this world, and it's the immediate prequel to a story that appeared in Lightspeed that's edited by John Joseph Adams Amaryllis, which was my Hugo nominated story. It was nominated for Hugo a few years ago, and there's a question raised in that story that the protagonist herself raises about why did her mother do this? It's a world where resources are managed to such an extent that unauthorized pregnancies are illegal. And her mother, she was an unauthorized pregnancy. And the question she's asking through the whole story is, why did her mother do this? So Bannerless is the answer to that question. And it's about her mother and why she did it. It's actually about the investigator sent to investigate what happened and why this pregnancy happened and what's actually going on. Because of course there's more to it than just this person is illegally pregnant. There's a whole subtext to that. And my initial reason that I guess you'd call it my mission statement for kind of all of these stories that I've been writing in this world. I wanted to write a more optimistic post-apocalyptic setting. Yes, great apocalypse has happened. Things are completely different. But I also wanted to write about characters in worlds where things are actually getting better. People actually are living in communities successfully. Not everything was lost, not everything was destroyed, and that they learned lessons, about resource management and making sure that everybody has enough and taking care of each other, which may sound a little optimistic and may sound a little idealistic even, but that's kind of my point. Is I wanted to say, well, what would happen if things actually worked out better than a Mad Max movie?
Okay, so John, final word. Anything else you want to add about the Apocalypse Triptych?
I mean, no, I just like he was saying, I mean, it was just a great ride doing all three books and having him as a partner on it. It was really an interesting experience because we also we not only edited these together, we also published them ourselves, sort of via CreateSpace and Amazon and Kindle and everything. And so that's been really interesting to do all that and have to, be involved at every level of the publishing process. But just anyone listening, I mean, if you're into these kinds of books, I mean, we'd love it if you check them out, obviously, but it's also, if you have read them and enjoyed them, please leave a review if you can, because we publish these ourselves, it's an indie project and every bit of word of mouth helps. So, if you love them, please let somebody else know.
And do you want to say anything, John, about Wastelands 2?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I also, yeah. So, The End Has Come just came out in May, but then just earlier this year, I had Wastelands 2 come out in February. That's a sequel to my first anthology, Wastelands. So Wastelands came out in 2008, and then, so then Wastelands 2 just came out this year. And so, that's been several years since then that, in order for more post-apocalyptic stories to sort of accumulate. So basically Wastelands 2 is, for the most part, picking up where Wastelands 1 left off in terms of chronology, sort of stories that were published since Wastelands 1 came out, more or less. There's a few stories that came out before, and especially for authors who were already in Wastelands 1, which because I already reprinted them once, I reprinted a different story in the second one. But it was really interesting to revisit that, post-apocalyptic fiction and in the reprint setting, trying to curate the best of what was out there after I had already done it once. So both books are completely reprints, and
it's like scavenging for supplies.
It is, yeah, it actually is kind of. I mean, it was a really interesting experience, and it was actually originally going to come out from Nightshade Books, but then Nightshade sort of had some difficulties, and so I ended up selling it to Titan, and so that was cool too, because it got to sort of introduce Wastelands to a different audience, because Titan has different distribution and is a larger company, and so that was cool. But I mean, it's got stories by George R. R. Martin, Junot Diaz, Hugh Howey, Sean McGuire, David Brin, Paolo Bacigalupi, and there's about let's see, I think there's like 30 something stories in there altogether. So. I mean, if you're an Apocalypse fan, and if you listen to this far into the podcast, you probably are, then you might want to check out that one too.
All right, cool. So I think we're going to have to wrap things up there. So I think everyone should go see Mad Max Fury Road. We all highly recommend it. And if you enjoy it, you should also go check out Wastelands 2 and the Apocalypse Triptych. And so I think we're going to wrap things up there. So guys, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thanks for having me, David.
Yeah, it was good to be here.
And that was our panel. So big thanks again to John Joseph Adams, Hugh Howey, and Carrie Vaughn for joining us on the show. And you can read Carrie's short story Bannerless, which we talked about in this episode, over on Wired.com, and we'll have a link to that on our website. So just visit us at geeksguideshow.com and check out the post for episode 152. I'd also like to thank everyone who's given us 5 stars on iTunes, including David APR, Love Me Some Sci-Fi, and All Is Temp. All Is Temp writes, I am late to the party, having only begun listening in the last month, and I love this podcast. The topics are entertaining, and David does a great job of being prepared with pertinent knowledge and information about the guests, and is flexible enough to move where the guest and the conversation leads. I am working my way through the archives as I wait for the next episode. So a big thanks to All Is Temp for that great review. And of course a very special thank you to Jim McVeigh and Chris Capobianco, who both signed up this week to support us on Patreon. Geek's Guide to the Galaxy is made possible thanks to support from listeners like you. So if you enjoy the show and want it to continue, please sign up to give us $1 or $2 per episode over at patreon.com/geeks. And if you'd prefer to make a one-time or fixed monthly contribution, you can do that over at geeksguideshow.com/crowdfunding. All right, so that was our show. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.
The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy is a production of Wired.com. For more information about the show, visit geeksguideshow.com. To learn more about your host, visit davidbarkirtley.com. Music and voiceover produced by yours truly, Jack Kincaid. If you enjoyed this program, tell your friends. If you didn't enjoy it, tell no one. Thank you for listening.